Yoga Decorum. As soon as I saw those lithe girls splayed on their mats of many colors, I knew that I was in. It wasn't just the girls. Arrayed in those postures around the blonde inlaid maple slats of that gym floor. It was the simple challenge. There was a time when I could touch my toes, fly forward with arms extended like Superman aloft on one leg, arch up from the floor with hands and feet grounded, pelvis toward the sky, and twist like a pretzel just for the fun of it. I may have only been 3 years old then, but why had I let those skills fall into disuse? When had I lost my flexibility? I could still do a handstand and a cartwheel. Wait till they see those. At my first class, I realized my general attitude was simply not acceptable. Though in some sense, they were well prepared to deal with all attitudes, pedestrian or Western as they may have been. In fact, they were tolerant of virtually everything, not least of my blocky, muscle-bound stiffness and generalized clumsiness. And to my credit, I did make some flexible mental adjustments, particularly in the Shavasana area, where you sleep on your back for 10 minutes at the end of the practice. I jumped into the flow of sun salutations, downward and upward dogs, cat-cows, chaturanga push-ups, warriors 1, 2, and 3, and crows with considerable aplomb. And the benefits to strength, flexibility, and well-being were undeniable, just like they said. Indeed, when, after 6 months of dedicated toning and balancing and stretching, when I finally managed to get off the floor in the aforementioned reverse crab position, the wheel, it's called, I genuinely appreciated the applause from the ladies in the group. My wife began referring to me as their yoga rooster. There was one cultural yoga norm which I never successfully accommodated: the lack of embarrassment of bodily releases, smells, and noises of all kinds. Yoga is, in fact, one step from the cultivation of such indignities. I am, in all fairness, referring to the kind of yoga, vinyasa, which does involve considerable exertion, jumping, stretching, lunging, twisting, etc. But swatches of sweat and snot are flung willy-nilly from these exertions. Groaning, grimacing, uncontrolled gasps, all common. The man, and there weren't many, who chose his mat position wisely, could find himself largely insulated, but there was one practice regarding the self which I found concerning, about which I personally remained guarded throughout my yoga enlistment. This was, to put the possibly unofficial Shada Rakmaharian term to it, the doctrine of ignoring, simply ignoring, namely, farting. There is something about farting, the loss of control, the admission that all of the possible gates to one's personal castle have not been sealed against either exodus or invasion. For me, even the smallest public peep from that quarter, indicating even the slightest dilution of focus, of strength, of resolve to the task at hand, undermines all. And this does not come close to estimating the effect of the immense moist blast, sometimes accompanying some not carefully enough controlled mat rolling movements among the careless. Welling from some oceanic bladder, concealed and unsuspected within one's own withers or abdomen. Such an emission could only involve an admission of total human mortality and animal occupation of the entire Western rational Leibnizian soul. What have the last few tens of centuries been for, after all? Have we made no progress? Have we come nowhere? In any case, I resolved not to permit it. I understand that this is a violation, a non-surrender to the final personless nothingness of Buddhahood. I get that. But I am not going to succumb to a public farting if I can help it, particularly if I am honorably trying to improve myself at the time. I am quite happy to accept a mushroom expansion of both my flexibility and consciousness in the most earnest manner, but not at the cost of expanding the audible volume in the room which surrounds me. However, not every strategy is successful. Human frailty and weakness, not to mention mistakes and misjudgments, are endemic. I therefore spent most of my spiritual effort during the exercises of my yoga practice over those long weeks deciding on my strategy, if indeed a fart, whether large or small, tiny like the buzz of an insect, or gigantic like an atomic blast, managed to leak out. Some may claim that my preoccupation with such a strategy interfered with receiving the full benefits of my yoga way of life, but I can't help it. I should mention, by the way, that the first rule of yoga, which, as you know, normally takes place in a mirrored chamber like a gym or dance floor, mirrored so that you can both examine and correct your own posture and, of course, admire yourself in the usual way of Narcissus at the stream. Let's be real here. But the first rule of yoga is, should there be an uncontrolled farting from some location on the floor, in addition to not examining the person at that location in the mirror, it is absolutely fatal to seek out the faces of others in the practice in the mirror to see what their reaction to the said apparent farting might be. This will lead to uncontrolled, reflexive, crowd-induced, gut-heaving laughter from much deeper regions of the human body which no culture, Buddhist, Himalayan, Tibetan, Siddharthian, or otherwise, can control. This laughter is not permitted in yoga. It is a violation. One must be careful. One must ignore the call of the forest beast as if it were an ordinary zephyr waffling the leaves in the innocent Edenic garden which surrounds us all. But what should I do if, in spite of my best efforts, I do identifiably fart in the yoga gym? Initially, in the early weeks, I merely contemplated looking directly into the yoga mirror and addressing all with a simple and direct, innocent, "That wasn't me." I know it's dishonorable. I knew it wouldn't be believed. But I thought it might elicit at least pity and understanding and allow me to pretend that it hadn't happened, at least till the end of the session, from which I would, of course, depart never to appear again. And that strategy did have the advantage, even though unforgivably throwing a guiltless party under the bus, of allowing that innocent party, though framed, to be unidentified. Of course, this strategy was not good enough. Perhaps the listener is aware of what it's like to go through life dressed in a cloak of untested perfection, if not out-and-out fraud, with a strategy that one knows will not suffice if ever put to the test. One must strive to mend that cloak. And so, ultimately, realizing that my denial strategy was untenable, knowing I probably couldn't pull it off anyway, envisioning the mirroring scorn from so many intimate faces that would be so severe, I kept thinking, revising, revisiting desperate scenarios, and looking within. Why was I so driven by shame anyway? Why couldn't I let go, accept, like everyone else who had submitted to the wisdom of the Swami? Why must I dishonor the practice with these cowardly plans? I considered submitting. I considered accepting. There were hoods in high school who could burp and fart and spit, if not actually vomit, on command and relish it. Why couldn't I be like that? But did Nietzsche submit? Did Rambo submit? Did Batman submit? The bottom line is, I retreated into evasion, debasement, evil. I never farted during those yoga decades, which I believe shows that I, in fact, had become an unalloyed yoga master, however you choose to measure that quality. But I did descend to a new plan, never executed, but repeatedly gamed out, worked through, revised, and varied. That plan was, if I farted, to accuse a not necessarily to be named party, who might conceivably be some distance away, depending on the level of talent available in the group that day. My plan was to claim to have been the victim of a fartriloquist.